we are going to have a look at integers. Integers include negative and positive numbers. So when we are working with 4 plus 3, we get an answer of 7. Right, so what we need to remember with our integers is that when we do not see a sign in front of our number, we need to assume that there is an imaginary positive there. And it's the same here for our 7 in our answer. So positive 4 plus 3 gives us an answer of positive 7. We know that. And if we work here with our number line, if we go from positive 4 there, and we plus 1, 2, 3 spaces to the right, because when we go to the right, that means we are plussing, and when we go to the left, that means we are minusing. Right, so because we were going to the right, we were plussing, and we ended up from 4, we added 1, 2, 3 to get to positive 7. Right, so that we are quite familiar with. That's we've been working on for a while. If, however, we now are faced with 4 minus 3, this sort of thing we are also quite familiar with. So if we start at 4 and we end up going 1, 2, 3 spaces back, we end up with positive 1. So remember that there's a positive there in front of the 4, and if we minus 3 from positive 4, we end up with positive 1. Right, so we are quite happy with those scenarios. Let's now have a look at what negative 4 plus 3 will end up giving us. So it's exactly the same here. We're working with 4 plus 3, except for the fact that our positive is now a negative 4. So our positive 4 is now a negative 4, and as we'll soon see, that changes the value of our answer quite a bit. So if we have a look here, if we start at our negative 4 and we plus 3, so when we are plussing, we are going to go that way. We are going to go to the right, and we are plussing 3, so we move 1, 2, 3 spaces to the right, and we end up with an answer of negative 1. So when we're working with our number line, we always work with our number line when we are plussing and minusing integers. So when we are working with our number line, we start with the first number that appears in our number sentence. So negative 4 is what we started with over there. And we were plussing 3, so we move 3 spaces to the right, and we end up with an answer of negative 1. Let's now have a look at what would happen if we started with positive 3 over there, and then we minused 4 from our positive 3. Let's see what we would end up with. So if we start with positive 3, we start on the right-hand side of our 0, because all those numbers will be positive. And we are minusing 4, so we end up going that way. When we minus, we go to the left. So we jump 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces to the left, and we end up again with negative 1. So as you can see, what we can do is we can actually swap these numbers around as long as you remember to take the sign with it. So we can say positive 3 minus 4, or we can say minus 4 plus 3, and we will end up with an answer of negative 1 either way. Right, so let's have a look at what would happen when we are working with negative 4 minus 3. So we're starting with negative 4 and we're minusing another 3. So let's just clear this. So we're starting at negative 4. So we put a little starter point there on our negative 4. And we are minusing 3, which means we are going that way. We are going to the left, and we're going to jump 3 spaces to the left. 1, 2, 3 spaces to the left, and we end up with negative 7. Right, so negative 4 minus 3 gives us an answer of negative 7. Let's now see what happens if we start with negative 3 and then we minus 4. So if we start here with negative 3, we jump 4 places back to the left because we are minusing 4. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces to the left, and we end up again with negative 7. So as you can see, negative 4 minus 3 equals negative 7, and negative 3 minus 4 equals negative 7. Right. So this is just a little introduction to integers, and it's just important for us to remember that when we are working with positive and negative numbers, and when we are just plussing and minusing them, we must make sure that we work with a number line. So let's have a look at a few more examples. We can start with any number. So let's choose negative 5. So we start with negative 5, we plus 4, and we minus 2. So we just work with the first two numbers first. So we start with negative 5, which we've got there, and then we are plussing 4. So we are going to move to the right 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. I end up with negative 1. So what I'll write is negative 1 now minus 2, and I then go from my negative 1, and I now need to go 2 spaces to the left because I'm now minusing. So when I'm minusing, I go to the left. So I start at my negative 1, and I go 1, 2 spaces to the left, and I end up with negative 3. Right, so as you can see here, negative 1 minus 2 is equal to negative 3. And we know that positive 1 plus 2 is also equal to positive 3. So when we are working with the same signs, so if we are working just with negatives, if we are just minusing negatives, then it's the same as adding those numbers together, but it will just be a negative number. Right, so let me just put these back into negatives so I don't confuse you. Right, so let's have a look at another example. If we have got negative 5, or not negative 5, we've just used negative 5, negative 10 plus 15 plus 4 minus 3. Right, so we start on negative 10, and we know that if we were to move 10 spaces to the right, 10 spaces to the right, that would be plus 10. That would get us to 0. So now we need to plus another 5. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces to the right. So that's our other 5 that we plus, and we end up with positive 5. So this gives us positive 5, and then we still need to do our positive plus 4 and minus 3. So now we're on positive 5. So we're on positive 5 at the moment. We now need to plus 4. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4 places to the right. Okay, so we've done that. We now need to minus 3. Right, so then we go from our positive 9, 1, 2, 3 places back, and we end up with positive 6 or just 6. Right, so negative 10 plus 15 plus 4 minus 3 ends up giving us an answer of positive 6 or just 6. What I would like you to do is start playing around with your number line. So you can either use the number line that we have here on the screen, or you can draw your own number line ranging from negative 10 through to 0 and then to positive 10. So start with negative 10 all the way counting in units up until 0, and then all the way up until 10. And what I want you to do is just start playing around with negative numbers and positive numbers and plussing and minusing them, and try and pick up different patterns. So what I've started here is starting at -4. What we can start picking up is different patterns starting at different numbers. So if we start at -4 and we plus 1, we end up with -3. So you can write that down. If we start with -4 again and we plus another 1, so we end up plussing 2, we end up with -2. If we start with -4 and we jump 3 places to the right, we end up with -1. If we start at -4 and jump 4 places to the right, we end up at 0. And -4 plus 5 will give us an answer of 1, and so on. So you can carry on working with this, but what I would like you to do is try and pick up patterns. So if we started with +1 and we then minused 4, I want you to pick up to see whether or not you would get the same answer. So if we start with +1 and we minus 4, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4 places back to the left, we end up with -3, and as you can see, that's the same answer there. So if we start with +2 and then we minus our 4, what will we end up with? We start with +2 over there, and we jump 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces back, and we again end up with -2. So I would like you to see that -4, or rather +3 minus 4, will give us an answer of -1, as will 4 minus 4, or +4 minus 4, will give us an answer of 0. And we know that because 4 minus 4 we have been working with for a long time. So we know that 4 minus 4 is equal to 0. So when we are faced with -4 plus 4, we can, in our heads, we can think of it as +4 minus 4, and then we will know that the answer is 0. In the same way, we can work with +5, or just 5, minus 4, and that will again give us an answer of 1, in the same way that -4 plus 5 gives us an answer of 1. So perhaps what you can do is start off with -10. -10 plus what will give you an answer of 0. So you need to understand or know how many places to the right you need to jump in order to get to 0. So you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 places to the right to get 0. And I encourage you to do some others as well. So we can start with 7 there and ask ourselves, I wonder how many, you can even estimate, how many spaces to the left, so basically 7 minus what, will give me an answer of -5. Right. So how many spaces to the left do I need to jump to get an answer of -5? So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I know that I need to minus 7 from 7 to get to 0. And then I need to go another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces to the left to get my -5. And so I jumped 7 places there. So that was minus 7 to get to 0. And then another 5 to the left to get to -5. So that gives me an answer of -5 and -7. I went -5 and -7, which means that I went 12 places all together to the left. So I ended up saying 7 minus 12 gives me an answer of -5. And then we can start recognizing certain things. We know with these certain numbers, we know that 12 minus 7 equals 5. We know that 12 minus 5 equals 7. Right. And we know that 7 plus 5 equals 12. So start playing around with your number line and start picking up certain patterns. So the 12 there that we saw, 12 minus 7 gives us an answer of 5. So -12 plus 7 will also give us an answer of -5. And so you can see that these three numbers link up. If we were working with two negatives, however, so if we were working with negative 12, or let's rather work with negative 7 minus 5, what we can do is act as if we were adding the 7 and the 5, but we know that we are going to go further into our negatives. So if we start with negative 7 there, we are going to end up going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places back, which would be negative 11, and then negative 12. So negative 7 minus 5 gives us an answer of negative 12, and that links to our 7 plus 5 equals 12. So that was a positive 7 plus 5 equals positive 12, and a negative 7 minus 5 equals negative 12. So start playing around with your number line and see if you can pick up all these sorts of patterns. We are now going to have a look at multiplying integers. So multiplying positive numbers by positive numbers, which we are already familiar with, and multiplying negative numbers by negative numbers, which we may not have learned yet, and then multiplying positive by negative numbers or negative numbers by positive numbers. So what we need to remember are these tricks. A positive number multiplied by a positive number will give us a positive answer. A negative number multiplied by a negative number will also give us a positive answer. So as you can see, if the signs are the same, if you are multiplying two numbers together but that have the same sign, so they are either both positive or both negative, your answer will be positive. Okay, so when we have opposite signs, so we've got a negative multiplied by a positive, or a positive number multiplied by a negative number, your answer will be negative. So positive multiplied by a negative gives us a negative answer, and a negative number multiplied by a positive number will also give us a negative number, a negative answer. Right, so let's just have a look at a few examples. If we have got 6 multiplied by 7, remember that both these numbers are positive. Because we don't put the signs in there, we assume that they are positive. And we know that 6 multiplied by 7 is equal to 42. Right, so if we now have a look at negative 6 multiplied by positive 7, or negative 6 multiplied by 7, what we need to do is we need to first deal with our signs. So we see that we've got a negative there, and we are multiplying our negative by a positive. So we just remind ourselves that when the signs are different, there is going to be a negative outcome. So because these signs are different, we are going to get a negative outcome. So our answer is going to be negative, and then we simply just multiply our numbers together as we would usually do, and we end up with 42 still. Okay, so when we were multiplying 6 by 7, because our signs were the same, they were both positive, we ended up with a positive answer of 42, or positive 42. But because with negative 6 multiplied by positive 7, our signs were different, so we ended up with a negative 42. Right, let's now have a look at negative, or let's say positive 6, or just 6 multiplied by negative 7. So it's exactly the same multiplication. We are timesing 6 by 7. So we know that our answer is going to be 42. We just need to see what our sign is going to be. So because again, we are multiplying opposite signs, we are multiplying a positive number by a negative number, we are going to have a negative answer. And then we multiply our 6 by our 7 to still get an answer of 42. So positive 6 multiplied by negative 7 is equal to negative 42, in the same way that negative 6 multiplied by positive 7 was also equal to negative 42. Right, let's now have a look at negative 6 multiplied by negative 7. So again, we need to deal with our signs first, or we can deal with them second, but it's wise to deal with them first because we are more used to just multiplying 6 and 7 together, and the signs part is the more tricky part. So negative multiplied by a negative, we remind ourselves that when the signs are the same, the answer is going to be positive. So a negative multiplied by a negative will give us a positive answer, and then we just say 6 multiplied by 7, which is equal to 42 again. So as you can see, when our signs were the same, we ended up with a positive answer. And when our signs were different, like in these two cases, we ended up with negative answers. And I hope you notice that your number stays exactly the same. So as long as we are using the same numbers as we did here, 6 multiplied by 7, your answer will be exactly the same. It's just your sign that will change. Right, let's have a look at some other examples. 4 multiplied by 5 is equal to 20. And we know that because we work with positive numbers, we have been working with positive numbers up till now. So just remember that those are two positives, and that will give us a positive answer. If we then work with negative 4 multiplied by negative 5, negative multiplied by a negative gives us a positive, and 4 multiplied by 5 gives us 20. Right, so if we now work with negative 4 multiplied by positive 5, or positive 4 multiplied by negative 5, either way, because our signs are different, because we are saying a negative number multiplied by a positive number, our sign will be negative, and because we've got a positive number multiplied by a negative number there, our sign will again be negative, and then we just multiply our numbers. So 4 multiplied by 5 is 20, and 4 multiplied by 5 is 20. So when our signs are the same, we end up, when we are multiplying signs that are the same, we end up with a positive answer. And when our signs are different, when we are multiplying a negative by a positive or a positive by a negative, our signs, the sign in our answer will be different, will be negative. Will be negative. Right. So let's have a look at one more example. 7 multiplied by 8 gives us an answer of 56. And we know that those are positive numbers because we have been dealing with positive numbers up until now. And now if these two numbers were both negative, we would again get a positive answer because a negative multiplied by a negative gives us a positive answer. And 7 multiplied by 8 gives us 56. Right, so negative 7 multiplied by 8 or multiplied by positive 8, it doesn't matter, will give us an answer of negative 56 because our signs are different. We are going to get a negative result. And if we say 7 multiplied by negative 8, we again get an answer of negative 56 because our signs were again different. When we have got a number and immediately after your number is a bracket, that means that it is that number multiplied by whatever is inside that bracket. So let's have a look at a few examples. If we have got 5 and then immediately a bracket, that actually means multiplied by whatever is inside that bracket. So that might be negative 8. Or that is negative 8 in this example. So we've got positive 5 multiplied by negative 8. So we first work with our signs, remember? So we've got a positive multiplied by a negative, which gives us a negative, because when our signs are different, we get a negative answer. And then 5 multiplied by 8 is equal to 40. So 5 with brackets immediately next to it and a negative 8 inside your brackets means 5 multiplied by negative 8, which gives us an answer of negative 40. Let's now have a look at negative 7 in brackets and then negative 9 in brackets. This just means negative 7 multiplied by negative 9. And that gives us an answer of a negative multiplied by a negative is a positive, and 7 multiplied by 9 is equal to 63. So we end up with an answer of positive 63, or just 63. Right, so negative 2, then 4 in brackets, and then negative 3 in brackets means negative 2 multiplied by positive 4 and then multiplied by negative 3. So that will give us an answer of negative 2 multiplied by positive 4. Well, a negative multiplied by a positive is a negative, and 2 multiplied by 4 is 8. And then we multiply that by negative 3, and we end up with a negative multiplied by a negative, which is equal to a positive. And 8 multiplied by 3 is equal to 24. So we end up with an answer of positive 24, or just 24. Negative 7 squared. Right, so negative 7 times by negative 7, or negative 7 multiplied by negative 7. Whichever way you would like to write it out, that's absolutely fine. Just remember that when we are squaring any number, we multiply it by itself. So we've got negative times a negative, which is equal to a positive. And we've got 7 multiplied by 7, which is equal to 49. So we end up with an answer of positive 49, or just 49. Right, when we have got a sign and immediately after your sign we've got a bracket, right, that means that there is an imaginary 1 there. So we're going to put a 1 in there because there is an imaginary 1 there. So just for the sake of working out, we put a 1 there because it's actually just saying that we are multiplying the sign by the sign. And because 1 multiplied by any number is just itself, we tend to just leave that 1 out because we know that 1 multiplied by anything is just itself. But because we are still learning about these things, let's put that 1 in there so that we can work it out nicely. So we end up with negative 1 multiplied by negative 5 multiplied by positive 3. So negative 1 times negative 5, a negative times a negative is a positive, and a 1 times 5 is 5. Then we multiply by positive 3, and that gives us an answer of positive 15, or just 15. Right, so let's have a look at negative 1. Remember, when there's a bracket immediately after the sign, then it means that there is a 1 there, multiplied by negative 4. This one's quite simple. We simply multiply our signs. So a negative times a negative is a positive, and 1 times 4 is 4. So that gives us an answer of positive 4, or just 4. So as you can see, when we didn't have our 1 there, all this negative sign was doing was trying to change the sign over here. So because this was a negative multiplied by a negative, we just ended up with a positive, and our number just stayed exactly the same. When we are dividing with integers, when we are dividing with positive numbers, we know that we will always get a positive result because that is what we have been working with. So when our signs are both positive, we know we'll get a positive result. When our signs are both negative, just like when we are multiplying a negative by a negative, in the same way, when we are dividing a negative number by a negative number, we still end up with a positive number. So when our signs are the same and we are dividing those two numbers, we end up with a positive answer. When our signs are different, however, so if we've got a negative divided by a positive or a positive divided by a negative, we will end up with a negative answer. So let's have a look at a few examples. 18 divided by 3 gives us an answer of 6. And that is because both these numbers there were positive, so we end up with a positive answer. Negative 18 divided by 3 or divided by positive 3 will give us an answer of negative 6, because a negative divided by a positive will give us a negative, and 18 divided by 3 gives us an answer of 6. If we have got positive 24 divided by 4, we end up with, or positive 4, we end up with an answer of positive 6. If we have negative 24 divided by 4, or positive 4, we end up with negative 6. So as you can see, when your signs are different, we end up with a negative answer, and when your signs are the same, we end up with a positive answer. So let's have a look here. If we were working with negative 18 divided by negative 3, we would still end up with positive 6. If we were working here with negative 24 divided by negative 4, we would still end up with an answer of positive 6, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. If we were working with positive 18 divided by negative 3, we would still end up with an answer of negative 6, because a positive divided by a negative or a negative divided by a positive will give us an answer of negative, and then whatever that number might be. So 18 divided by 3 is 6, so we will always get 6 as our answer, and then depending on our signs, that will change. So if over here we end up with positive 24 divided by negative 4, we will again end up with negative 6, and that is simply because our signs were different. We end up with a negative answer. Right, so let's have a look at a few more examples. Negative 14 divided by negative 2 will give us an answer of a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 14 divided by 2 is 7. Right, so 14 divided by 2 is 7. We know that, so if we were working with positive numbers, we would also end up with positive 7. If we are working with different numbers, so different signs, however, we end up with negative 14 divided by positive 2. That will give us an answer of negative 7. Or positive 14 divided by negative 2. That gives us an answer of negative 7 as well. And that is simply because our signs are different when we were dividing. Let's have a look at 48 divided by 8. We know that this is equal to 6. So negative 48 divided by negative 8 rather, will also give us an answer of positive 6, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. If we have negative 48 divided by positive 8, we end up with negative 6, or positive 48 divided by negative 8, we again end up with negative 6. So let's just remember that divisions are exactly the same as fractions. So when we are working with fractions, for example, negative 18 divided by 2, that will give us an answer of negative 8. Well, that means negative 18 divided by positive 2, which gives us an answer of negative, because we've got a negative divided by a positive, and 18 divided by 2 is 9. If we have a look at another example, negative 9 divided by negative 3, that means negative 9 divided by negative 3, which is the same as negative 9 over 3, and that will give us an answer of positive 3 or just 3, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 9 divided by 3 gives us an answer of 3. So we end up with an answer of 3 there. We are now going to have a look at some examples revising what we have just learned. We have got negative 4 plus 3, and then we've got brackets, negative 2, close brackets, open brackets, negative 5, close brackets. So remember that when we have got a number and brackets immediately afterwards, it means that we are multiplying by the number inside that bracket, and we will be multiplying there again because we've got brackets right next to each other. Right, so remember that BODMAS will always apply. So we are going to do our multiplying first. So we bring our negative 4 down so that we don't forget to do that. And then we say a positive multiplied by a negative, which is equal to a negative. And then 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. And then we multiply that by negative 5. So now we are working with negative 6 multiplied by negative 5. So we bring down our negative 4, and we have got negative 4 minus 6 times negative 5. So we do that first. Negative times a negative is a positive, and 6 multiplied by 5 is 30. So we end up with a final answer of 26, because negative 4 plus 30, if we do that on our number line on the side, we will go from negative 4, we first plus 4 to get to our 0, and then we have to plus another 26 to get to our full 30 that we needed to add to our negative 4. So our answer is positive 26 or just 26. Right, let's have a look at another example. 72 divided by negative 8 minus negative 2 and multiplied by negative 12. Right, so again, we must remember that BODMAS still applies. So we have got 72 divided by negative 8. Remember that that is a positive 72 divided by negative 8. So let's do that first. A positive divided by a negative gives us a negative. So we write down our negative, and then we say 72 divided by 8, which gives us an answer of 9. So we have now done that, and we are now going to say negative 1. Remember, there's an imaginary 1 there if there is no number in between the sign and the brackets. So negative 1 multiplied by negative 2 multiplied by negative 12. So we bring down our negative 9, and we say negative 1 multiplied by negative 2. Negative multiplied by a negative is a positive, and 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, and we multiply that by negative 12. So we work with positive 2 multiplied by negative 12. A positive multiplied by a negative is a negative, and 2 times 12 is 24. So we end up with a final answer of negative 33. Because we are working with a negative 9 minus 24, because both our numbers are negative, we are just going further back into our negative. So we start on our number line, we start there at negative 9, and we go back 24 spaces. So we minus 24, and we end up 24 spaces more into our negative, which will end up here at negative 33. So what we can work with is know that we are going to end up with a negative answer because we are going from negative 9 further into our negatives by minusing another 24. So we can then know that we're going to end up with a negative and then say 9 plus 24, which is equal to 33. So we end up with an answer of negative 33. But remember that when we are just plussing and minusing with our negative numbers or our integers, we must use a number line. We do not use our positive times positive rule and negative times negative rule. That is only when we are timesing and dividing with negative and positive numbers. So when we are just plussing and minusing with integers, we use our number line. Right, let's have a look at one more example. 9 minus, in brackets, 4 minus 7, close brackets, and then in brackets we've got a 5. Right, so 9 minus, we've got an imaginary 1 there, multiplied by the answer in these brackets. So 9 minus 1 multiplied by 4 minus 7, we obviously need to work out what that is, and that is equal to negative 3, because a positive 4, if you work on your number line, you've got a positive 4 there, and if you minus 7, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 places back, and you end up with negative 3. So you go past your 0, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4 places back, and you go past your negative 1 and your negative 2, you end up with negative 3. And then you are multiplying that by positive 5. Right, so we obviously are going to work with BODMAS as usual. So let's work with negative multiplied by a negative, which is equal to a positive. So 9 minus 1 times negative 3 is positive. 1 multiplied by 3 is 3. And then we multiply that by positive 5. So we're still working with our BODMAS. And we say a positive times a positive is a positive. And 3 multiplied by 5, I beg your pardon, is equal to 15. And 9 plus 15 will give us an answer of 24. And there's our final answer.